The crackle of the campfire was the only sound in the air besides the occasional bullfrog's call and the whisper of lake water brushing the rocky shore. It was a perfect dusk, sky streaked with copper and lavender, my dog Bowie curled at my feet, a hot dog skewered over the flame, and not another soul in sight. Or so I thought. Then came the voice. Sharp. Condescending. Already loaded with assumptions. You can't do that here. I turned, expecting maybe a park ranger or one of the Lake Association volunteers. Instead, I saw the perfectly pressed khakis and pastel windbreaker of a woman with a clipboard in one hand and a phone in the other. Karen Boyd. If you've ever lived near a lake, and I mean really near it, with deeded access and confusing shoreline maps drawn in the 1970s, you probably know a Karen. But Oakmere Landing had the original. The prototype. HOA president of the Upper Bank Homes, self-declared lake guardian, and local tyrant of all things damp and communal. You're endangering the entire lake community, she snapped, already dialing. I blinked, not quite processing. It's a campfire, ma'am. Legal, contained, water bucket right there. You're not authorized. This is protected shoreline. The 911 operator picked up, and Karen launched into a breathless tirade about an armed stranger with open flame terrorizing a delicate wetland ecosystem. I tried to get a word in, but she turned her back to me, pacing like a prosecutor mid-closing argument. She even waved her clipboard dramatically in the air. I half expected her to call in a SWAT team for the hot dog. 10 minutes later, the red and blue lights crested the hill, washing over the trees like an accusation. Bowie stood up, ears perked, but didn't bark. He's smarter than most humans I know. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out, one of them already rubbing his temples. They looked around, saw the single log fire, the bucket of water, and me, sitting cross-legged in cargo shorts, still holding a roasting stick. Evening, one of them said, eyes flicking to the fire. Got a call about. I lit a campfire. On my property. Property? The other deputy asked, pulling out a notepad. Yep. Lot 43C. My name's Declan Pierce. Just moved in last month. Karen scoffed behind them. He's lying. That's community shoreline. That fire could damage the aquatic reeds. There are duck nests. The deputy raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, the ducks are 200 feet that way. And, he looked back at me, you got ID, sir? I handed him my license. He read it. Looked at me. Then nodded toward the fire. Well, I see a campfire, a dog, and a hot dog. That's it. Karen wasn't done. She stomped forward, waving a rolled-up HOA bylaws pamphlet like it was a search warrant. He's not even a member of our HOA. He doesn't belong here. I looked her in the eye for the first time. Really looked. Her lips were trembling, not from anger. From fear. And that's when I realized, it wasn't the fire that terrified her. It was me being there. Something about my presence, not my face, not my dog, not even the harmless fire, had triggered a reaction so visceral that she bypassed every reasonable response and went straight to 911. Because she wasn't worried I'd burn down the lake. She was scared I might find something. The fire was out within minutes. I dumped the bucket over it myself, more to satisfy protocol than safety. The deputies apologized, told Karen to cool it, and left. But she didn't. She stood on the hill above the lake for a solid 5 minutes, just watching me pack up. Don't get comfortable, she hissed finally. You're not welcome here. That night, back in the lakeside cottage, technically a remodeled boathouse, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the incident. But because of what she said. I'd inherited the place from my late uncle, Gordon Pierce. He'd passed last year, suddenly, unexpectedly, and left me this odd little cottage on the water. I hadn't spent much time here as a kid, and Gordon wasn't exactly a talker, so I knew almost nothing about the property. Except that he'd once told me, cryptically, we own more than they think. At the time, I thought he meant the old fishing shed. Now? I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I walked into the county recorder's office. Old school building, dusty windows, a single lady named Bernice behind the desk who'd worked there since dial-up internet. "Looking for anything specific?" she asked, peering over her readers. "Lot 43C, Oakmere Landing. Title history. Full chain, if possible." She squinted. "That's lake property, right? Right on the shore." She typed. Then paused. "Well, that's strange." My stomach tightened. "What is?" "You've got a deed from 1986 that references riparian water management rights. And, hang on." She clicked through several windows, printing pages as she went. "This clause here," she said, pointing with a pen, "it's a bit outdated, but still enforceable. Gives the property owner final say on any water usage approvals for Block C shoreline, which includes docks, inflows, even shoreline maintenance." I blinked. "Block C?" "Yeah," she said, "that's Karen Boyd Street." Karen didn't just call the cops on a campfire. She triggered a chain of events that would unravel decades of hidden authority, expose illegal HOA maneuvers, and flip the power dynamics of the entire lakeside community. What comes next? Surveillance. Fake citations. A mysterious clause no one remembered signing. And a battle over water rights that would leave more than just tempers scorched. By the time I walked out of the county recorder's office, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the weight of the papers I was holding. Deed maps. Amendments. A dusty affidavit from 1986 signed by 3 men who apparently had no idea the monster they were accidentally birthing. At the top of the second page was a phrase that didn't hit me until hours later. "All riparian usage access, taxation rights, and shoreline utility easements, hereinafter referred to as water governance, shall be vested in perpetuity with the registered owner of parcel 43C. Me. They gave me the water. Not just the dock. Not just the rocks where ducks like to nest. Every inch of lake access that Karen Boyd's HOA built their shoreline dream homes around, every aluminum dock, every weed spraying schedule, every ridiculous no swimming before 9 a.m. sign, was connected to my shoreline. And apparently, Karen had no idea. But someone in her HOA might have. Because by nightfall, things started getting weird. At 2:15 a.m., Bowie growled at the back door. He never growls. I checked the porch camera on my phone and spotted a silhouette ducking behind the neighbor's canoe rack. Whoever it was moved fast, too fast to be out for a stroll. They didn't approach. Just circled. I didn't sleep after that. At 6:03 a.m., I found a citation taped to my boathouse door. Violation, unauthorized fire activity on protected land. Fine, $750. In the corner was a logo I recognized from the HOA newsletter Karen had stuffed in my mailbox 2 weeks ago. It wasn't even addressed to me. The HOA had no authority over my property. But now they were acting like they did. That morning, I paid another visit to Bernice. "You again," she said with a smirk. "Did the lake try to bite back?" "Not yet. But someone's pretending I'm not its landlord." I showed her the citation. She rolled her eyes and pulled out a folder from the cabinet labeled Oakmere, Original Deeds. "You're going to love this," she said. "See, your uncle? He wasn't just eccentric. He was smart. When this HOA started forming in the late 1990s, a bunch of owners consolidated their access to the lake through blanket permits. But Gordon? He refused. Filed objections. Made them sign non-integration waivers to avoid tying your lot into their governance. She flipped to a form signed by Karen's predecessor. My uncle had legally isolated our property from the HOA, but the kicker? He made them dependent on it. Because those same waivers? They acknowledged that their lake privileges were contingent upon parcel 43CS water governance approval. I owned the access they needed to exist. And Karen? She was standing on a power structure built on sand. By noon, 3 more violations appeared. 1 for improper storage of aquatic equipment. I guess my kayak leaned against the wall wrong. Another for disturbing local wildlife, meaning Bowie barked at a heron. And a third? Unauthorized signage. The private property, no trespassing signs I'd installed the day before. But the most chilling part came that evening. At 7:48 p.m., I saw movement again on my porch camera. Someone in a hoodie crept up to my mailbox and placed a small square box inside. I walked outside slowly, one hand on my phone. When I opened it, I found a USB drive. And a note. Stop digging. Or the water isn't the only thing that'll turn against you. Now I knew what Karen was afraid of. It wasn't the fire. Or the duck nests. Or even the camp chair I'd left on the sand. It was that I might find this. And I had. But now it was time to test just how deep this went. So I called in a favor. Meet my cousin Elena, CPA, forensic auditor, and the type of woman who sees spreadsheets where others see crime scenes. I want you to look at every expense the HOA has paid out in the last 10 years, I told her. Especially anything labeled shoreline maintenance or environmental management. She whistled low. What's the play? If they've been paying taxes or fees for land they don't actually control, then someone's been embezzling. Or worse, she said, already clicking away. The next day, I got the footage from the USB. A grainy night vision video. My shed. 2 figures. One of them looked suspiciously like Greg Dunlop, the HOA treasurer. The other? Karen. They weren't doing damage, yet. But they were measuring something. Whispering. Pointing at my electrical panel. Looks like they were trying to find a utility excuse, Elena said when I showed her. To say your systems violate code and threaten the neighborhood grid. And if I didn't cooperate? They file an injunction. Force a lien. Scare you into submission. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was livid. Part 2 ends with a new fire being lit, not in the fire pit, but under the feet of a woman who built her kingdom on borrowed water. Karen tried to drown me in bylaws. But she didn't know the lake's tide had already shifted. By the end of the week, my mailbox had become less a place for mail and more a collection site for thinly veiled threats wrapped in pseudo-legal stationery. Citations for non-existent landscaping violations. Warnings about invasive plant species. Even a community reminder that excessive grilling can increase shoreline ozone levels. But they weren't trying to punish me. They were trying to bury me under paperwork until I broke. And I wasn't about to break. Because Elena? She found the gold. You're gonna want to sit for this, she said over the phone. Shoot. There's a line item in the HOA's financials labeled WUF, Water Utility Fund. And for the past 6 years, they've been collecting dues from every member on Karen's block under the pretense of paying a state lake maintenance fee. Okay. But that fee doesn't exist. The state doesn't bill individual HOAs for shoreline upkeep. That responsibility falls on the water rights holder. Which, in this case, is me. Exactly. And there's no record of you ever billing them or receiving a cent. Which meant Karen's HOA had been charging homeowners for access they didn't own, and funneling the money into something else. I spent the next 2 nights compiling a dossier. Every citation. Every violation. The security cam footage of Karen and Greg creeping around my breaker box. Copies of the WUF billing statements Elena had pulled from archived emails and public records. The deed clause from 1986 in highlighter yellow. I didn't go to the sheriff. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go. That Sunday morning gave me the answer. It started with Bowie barking, again. I stepped outside and saw a man in a high-visibility vest snapping photos of my electrical meter. Hey! I called. Can I help you? He turned fast, startled. Routine inspection, he said. Ordered by the HOA. They don't have jurisdiction here. He blinked. Oh. "I didn't know that. You're trespassing. Kindly leave." He mumbled something and walked off, fast. That afternoon, I drove through Karen's block just once. Just once. 6 houses had sprinklers running into the lake. 3 docks extended illegally past the permitted distance. One had a shed with clear runoff pipes draining into the water. I took photos of it all. And on Monday morning, I printed them. Along with my dossier. And I didn't send it to the sheriff. I sent it to every homeowner on Karen's street. The subject line of the email was simple. Water rights, HOA fraud, and your monthly dues. The body of the message detailed everything. That I was the legal controller of their shoreline access. That Karen's HOA had been billing them fraudulently for years. That surveillance and citations had been used to harass me into silence. That if anyone wanted a refund, they should direct their questions to their treasurer, Greg Dunlop. I included contact numbers, attachments, evidence. And I signed off with, "The water is still yours to enjoy. But it's no longer hers to control. Declan Pierce, owner, Parcel 43C." The explosion didn't take long. By 3 p.m., a thread on the neighborhood's private forum had over 400 comments. By 5 p.m., someone had created a Change.org petition demanding Karen's resignation. At 6:41 p.m., I received an anonymous text. "She's losing it," screamed at 2 residents in her driveway. Then she threw her HOA binder in the trash. The next morning, 2 things happened. 1. A lawyer representing several residents emailed me directly, asking for a formal statement confirming the fraudulent billing. 2. A drone appeared outside my kitchen window. It hovered there for about 10 seconds before Bowie barked and it darted away. But I'd had enough. At exactly 10:13 a.m., I filed a cease and desist letter with the county clerk, naming the Oakmere Landing HOA as a hostile entity engaging in unlawful surveillance, harassment, and extortion via misrepresented water rights. And then I called Bernice. "Hey," I said. "What's the protocol if a water rights holder decides to reassign usage privileges to another managing entity?" She chuckled. "Depends. You starting your own HOA?" I smiled. "Not an HOA. Just a shoreline committee. One that operates by invitation only." They called it a community emergency assembly. But the tone was anything but communal. It was set for Thursday night, held at the Oakmere Landing Clubhouse, a modest building with fake colonial columns, fluorescent lights, and chairs that squeaked with every ounce of neighborhood tension. The kind of place designed to look civil even when war breaks out. And make no mistake, war had broken out. Karen Boyd called the meeting herself. Probably hoping she could spin the narrative back into her favor, slap a fresh coat of HOA paint over the rot, and accuse me of misinterpreting property law. She had no idea what was about to hit her. When I arrived, the room was nearly full. Dozens of residents. A few HOA board members. And Karen, standing near the podium, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too tight and a smile that looked stitched on with dental floss in desperation. I didn't go up front. I stood in the back, arms crossed, dossier in hand, waiting. Karen cleared her throat into the mic. "There's been some confusion," she began, voice sugary and taut. "About lake access, our financial structure, and the nature of our community agreements. I want to personally assure everyone." "Did you steal our money?" a voice barked from the second row. Laughter. A few gasps. Someone clapped. Karen flinched. "No. Absolutely not. The water utility fund was allocated." "To who?" another resident cut in. "Because Declan says he owns the shoreline." All eyes turned to me. I walked forward slowly, not saying a word until I reached the front table. Then I slid the stack of documents onto the podium beside her. "This," I said, tapping the highlighted clause, "is the deed to Parcel 43C. It contains language giving the property owner, me, governance rights over all riparian access tied to Block C." I pointed toward the crowd. That's your street. A hush fell. Karen's fingers gripped the edge of the podium like she might snap it off. But what's worse, I continued, is that your HOA, under Karen's direction, has been collecting dues for lake access without having legal authority to do so. That's fraud. And here, I lifted a second binder, are the receipts, itemized. Elena had color-coded everything. Red for suspicious. Yellow for unauthorized. And green for the one payment that went to an actual state-certified water inspector, 4 years ago. That's when the treasurer, Greg, stood up. I didn't know, he said, voice cracking. Karen said the permits were grandfathered in. That it was just formality. Karen wheeled on him. You signed off. Greg backed away. In the room? It broke. Voices rose. Arguments erupted. People started filming. I stepped back, watching it unfold like a documentary about HOA collapse in real time. Karen tried to shout above the noise. Listen. I did this to protect property values. To maintain order. Without structure. You mean without control? I said, louder than I meant to. She stopped. Eyes burning. And then, almost imperceptibly, her hand moved to her purse. I couldn't explain why, but instinct kicked in. I stepped closer. What's in the bag, Karen? She pulled out a USB stick. A single label on it, Lake Watch. Her hand trembled. It wasn't supposed to get out, she muttered. None of it. I took it gently. What is it? She stared at the floor. Proof. Surveillance. We had cameras, under the docks. Monitoring boats. Watercraft. Who fished where. Even who walked on the shoreline barefoot. To keep records. For leverage. The room went dead silent. Even the angry voices froze. She looked up, tears gathering. I didn't want it to be like this. The footage from the USB went public the next morning. Local news stations aired it within hours. Underwater cameras. Zoomed-in license plates. Date-stamped images of children swimming. Residents sunbathing. One video even tracked a dog urinating on a dock. It was invasive. Disturbing. Illegal. And suddenly, very real. By noon, the county commissioner announced a review of Oakmere Landing's HOA charter. By 2 p.m., the sheriff's department issued a public statement confirming multiple violations of state surveillance laws. By 4 p.m., Karen Boyd resigned. Her last message to the community came in a 3-line email. Effective immediately, I will be stepping down from my position. I acted in what I believed were the community's best interests. I see now I was wrong. But here's the twist. That wasn't the end. Because 2 days later, I received a letter. Not from Karen. Not from the HOA. From the Regional Environmental Board. Apparently, Karen had quietly applied years ago for a shoreline management grant, claiming oversight rights to my parcel. They approved it, assuming everything was above board. The funds? Never reached me. But they were used. To pave. To dredge. To install HOA-branded dock signage. All of it federally reimbursed under false pretense. And now that I had surfaced the truth, the audit was spilling over. Next, the audit reveals missing grant money. A buried HOA bank account. And a secret vote that rewrites the future of the lake and the neighborhood itself. Because Karen tried to drown me in rules. But I learned to breathe underwater. The day the auditors arrived, the lake was still. Not metaphorically, eerily still. No kayaks. No lawn chairs. Even the ducks had cleared out, like they'd sensed what was coming. 3 black SUVs pulled into Oakmere Landing. Federal plates. Suit-clad officials stepping out with tablets, briefcases, and a confidence that said, "We're not here for small talk." And just like that, the HOA's petty rulebook was replaced by real law. It started with a grant. The Regional Environmental Board had awarded Oakmere Landing $62,500 over a 4-year span for shoreline preservation and sustainable lake access improvements. But the grant was misfiled. The application listed shoreline caretaker, parcel 43C, meaning me, but Karen Boyd had forged my uncle's name on the original filing. She hadn't just overstepped. She'd committed federal fraud. And every project built on that money, from the aluminum dock extensions to the native vegetation buffer zones, was now being inspected by the same people who prosecuted environmental misuse cases. Karen had gambled the whole HOA's credibility on a power she didn't possess. And she lost. The auditors met with me privately at the lake house. "We don't believe you were complicit," said the lead agent, a no-nonsense woman named Ramirez. "Your name and property are victims here. But we need full transparency." I handed them everything. The surveillance USB. The altered bylaws Karen slipped into neighborhood mailboxes. Even emails Elena uncovered between Karen and a shell contractor, Greenflow Maintenance, a company that didn't even exist before 2021. Ramirez read one aloud. "Let's just make it look official. No one reads the paperwork anyway." Yeah. That aged poorly. Over the next week, Oakmere Landing became a war zone of quiet revelations. The HOA's financials were frozen. Their monthly dues suspended. 2 board members resigned for personal reasons. Greg, the treasurer, admitted under oath that he'd funneled $9,400 from the water utility fund into miscellaneous reimbursements, including landscaping upgrades for Karen's property. And then came the bank account. Elena found it. A second HOA account hidden under a variation of the association's name, Oakmere Lakefront Alliance. Created 2 years ago. Its balance? $108,203. All unaccounted for. Ramirez stared at the screen and just said, "We've got a problem." Karen had vanished. Her house, gutted. Signs removed. A for sale by owner flyer taped to the door. No one knew where she went. But what she left behind was worse than silence. It was uncertainty. Residents were panicking. Without a functioning HOA, shoreline permits hung in limbo. Dock repairs stalled. Insurance premiums rose. It was chaos. So, I made a decision. The last thing anyone expected. I didn't sue. I didn't gloat. I hosted a community meeting. 55 people showed up, nervous and tired. I stood on the boathouse deck, dressed in jeans and a faded flannel, Bowie snoozing at my feet like a furry exclamation point of calm. I didn't come here to fight an HOA, I told them. I came here to build something. This lake, it doesn't need rules to keep us neighbors. It needs trust. I proposed a shoreline committee. No dues. No enforcement squads. Just a voluntary network to handle real concerns, erosion, boat safety, shared dock usage, with decisions based on consensus, not control. Don't ask for power, I said. Ask for participation. They voted that night. 54-1. Approved. The one no vote? An anonymous submission. Scribbled in tiny print. Water is not for sharing. The same handwriting as the warning note I got weeks ago. Karen, wherever she was, still believed she owned something. But the water? It was finally free. Epilogue. Today, the lake's still. But now it feels calm, not silent. The docks are shared. The ducks returned. No more fake citations. And that old campfire ring? I left it where it is. Sometimes, when the sun dips low and the wind carries the scent of smoke and pine, I light a fire. Not to roast hot dogs. But to remember that sometimes the best revolutions start not with noise, but with quiet ownership of the truth.